Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Equity Leader Speaker Series. I'm excited to see you all. We're going to give a minute or so as everybody files in um, before we get started. And as I see folks jumping in, just a reminder that this meeting is being recorded. You'll have access to the chat as well as a Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. And we can describe more about those tools as we start the panel here. But as folks take a minute to file in, why don't you go ahead and in the chat there, say hello, offer your name and where you're zooming in from. And you can either offer a word or two that comes to mind when you think of what a good mentor looks like, or maybe you want to share the name of a mentor that has really meant a lot to you in your life or in your work. All right, so we're gonna keep letting folks file in, and in the interest of time, we'll get going. Welcome again to our second installation of the Equity Leaders Speaker Series for 2025, hosted by the California Landscape Stewardship Network. My name is Devin Landry. I serve as CLSN manager, and just really thankful to see everyone filing in for this great session that's coming up, where we're going to profile just a few of the state's rising leaders that are doing work in stewardship, conservation, and social justice. For those that are not as familiar, the California Landscape Stewardship Network is a statewide network that brings together a variety of place-based collaboratives up and down the state, as well as partner organizations from across California that are helping to advance the important elements of our work in landscape stewardship, the policy, the practice, and performance of our work. And together, we like to take a look at the statewide scale to focus on systems level solutions and how collaborative landscape scale approaches can serve our entire state while also uplifting these specific places that we care so much about. And because we take that statewide view, we really try to center ourselves and define ourselves through elements of this work: human connectivity, finding shared values, finding common purpose. And I'm especially grateful for our Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Roundtable, this working team at the California Network, because they're the ones actively working together to create tools, approaches, resources, and meaningful conversation that really helps to evolve our work in landscape scale conservation and stewardship so that it's more inclusive, more equitable, and more culturally relevant to all Californians. So this speaker series, the Equity Leader Speaker Series, is designed to really bring some of those conversations to life about how we can all work with justice and belonging as the core values that underpin this work. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it to today's moderator, Laurel Wee, who is with Grassroots Ecology and also provides time as co-chair to the JEDI Roundtable. Laurel, welcome in.
Hi, thank you, Devin. Hi, welcome everyone. Like Devin said, my name is Laurel Wee. I am a co-chair of the California Landscape Stewardship's JEDI Roundtable, and I am a project manager at Grassroots Ecology. I'm calling in today from Berkeley, California, the ancestral and unceded lands of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. Yeah, and so today I'm super excited to introduce our panelists today for this Rising Leaders speaker panel. So we are joined today by three different panelists who are emerging leaders in their fields. And as I share the panelists' bios, they'll be coming onto screen and joining me for this panel. And then they are going to share the answer to our first question today, which is what inspired them to work at the intersection of environmental conservation and social justice. So yeah, joining us first is Chiena Tai. Chiena is an educational and influential content creator with a deep passion for storytelling, sustainability, and community. She recently completed 2 terms with the California Climate Action Corps, or CCAC, as a communications fellow at the California Natural Resources Agency, where her work supported California's 30 by 30 biodiversity initiative. She celebrated employee voices through cultural heritage features and even represented the program at historic climate events with President Biden. She currently supports the Asian American Pacific Islander AAPI Focus Outreach and Storytelling at the Sacramento Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce and recently volunteered with AAPI Placer County, helping amplify community voices through cultural events and interviews. As she steps away from that volunteer role due to relocation, she remains deeply committed to social justice in AAPI spaces and is eager to continue uplifting underrepresented stories while pursuing impactful opportunities in environmental communication. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Chiena. And yeah, what inspired you to join your field?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Chiena, and like Laurel has shared, I've been part of the climate action space for the past 2, 3 years. And I would say my first start to that interest was learning in my college classes that I was a part of the consumerisms that were just carelessly buying and throwing away, and that all of it would go to landfills. And so once I learned about that, I wanted to be a part of the solution and educate people about why it's so harmful to continue to consume without being more considerate. And that's where I started my environmental work journey.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really great to hear that you were inspired through your education and continue to educate people today. Next up, we have Perla Martus joining us. Perla is an early career environmental professional who graduated with a bachelor's in ecology and evolutionary science at UC Merced to achieve her goal of restoring different ecosystems. Her habitat restoration journey began with the Watershed Stewards program, where she worked with grassroots ecology to lead volunteer events, restoration tasks, and help at the organization's nursery. Currently, Perla is working with the National Park Service Marine Vegetation Team, where she works in invasive plant management and aims to continue non-native plant control, promote biodiversity through landscape enhancement, and engage community members in habitat restoration tasks. Beside habitat restoration, she's also passionate about making nature more accessible to everyone and has participated in nature walks, volunteer events, and tabling for nonprofits such as Puentes and Latina Outdoors. So thank you so much for joining us today, Perla. Yeah, and what inspired you to join your field?
Yeah, so a little background about myself. I was born and raised in San Diego, the first Mexican American in my family. And when my parents were young and we were really young, they would take us out to like the beach, go on hike, and just like being outside a lot because that was what was most like accessible to us and free for them. So even though like in their heads they were trying to like nurture like three growing kids, I don't think they really understood that they were also creating a very important and intimate relationship to the land for us. And because of that, it really pursued me to like encouraged me to pursue an education in ecology and evolutionary science, where I went to UC Merced in the Central Valley, and also because of the communities I was brought up in. I was born and raised in City Heights, which is a very diverse community with a lot of people who have different walks of life. And because of those experiences, I became very interested in that interdisciplinary of environmental and social science. And as someone who during their undergrad was doing a lot of like research and also a lot of like community outreach, I found myself leaning more towards the community outreach just because of the accessibility, I had to continue to be part of my community and continue to foster those deep connections to nature and the people. So that's where my like interest came and passion came about to be. And also because of my previous experience with grassroots ecology and my current experience with the Golden Gate National Recreational Area, where I have the opportunity to do land stewardship, but also engage people with the land. So that's where my background comes from.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's so great to hear about your early childhood connection to nature and how you're working to foster that for others now in your community engagement. Thank you. So next up, we are going to welcome on Sharon Musa. So Sharon is a self-described social ecologist, deeply interested in complex relationships between people, communities, and their environments. Sharon began her career in equitable environmental policy as a government relations fellow with the Wilderness Society in 2020. And over the past 5 years, Sharon has supported the expansion of the San Gabriel Mountain National Monument, the adoption of 30 by 30 in California, and the implementation of LA County's Parks Needs Assessment Plus initiative. In 2024, Sharon participated in Justice Outside's Rising Leaders Fellowship. And this year is a member of the National Parks Conservation Association, or NPCA, Next Gen Advisory Council. Sharon currently works as the External Affairs Manager for Catalina Island Conservancy, where they continue to utilize strategic partnerships with government and community to promote conservation and recreational access. So thank you so much for joining us today. And can you please tell us about what inspired you to join this field?
Yeah, in a lot of ways, I think I kind of fell into my current line of work in equitable conservation policy uh, by mistake and by happenstance. I didn't think that I would, well, I studied neuroscience and African American studies. So coming from a background of cognitive science and social sciences, I had never really studied anything in ecology or the environmental policy world. But because I was graduating in 2020, and we all know kind of what was going on in the world in 2020, especially by late spring, early summer, I really was kind of trying to figure out like what is the next step for me. I want to find some job. And fortunately, through my university, there were a series or kind of a suite of fellowships that people could participate in called High Meadows Fellowships, and all of them were at different environmental organizations. And although I didn't really have an academic background in policy, growing up, I did a lot of speech and debate, which I think influenced the ways that I think about advocacy. And it just so happens that, I applied to several different fellowships through the High Meadows Fellowship Program. And one of the organizations that got back to me was the Wilderness Society, and they focus on public lands policy. So I joined with them as a fellow in late 2020, and I was working on a portfolio of policy focused on equitable access to nature. And particularly in 2020, when so many people were desperate for parks, the work that I was doing really connected foundationally for me to mental health and human necessity for green spaces. And then also highlighted how inequitable those spaces are based on people's income, their racial backgrounds, the type of neighborhood that they're living in, et cetera. So although I hadn't studied the environmental policy side of things, all of the academic background that I did have thinking about cognition, human behavior, equity, sociology, and social interactions, it really kind of connected to what I already understood. And then I would also even echo what Perla was saying of, growing up, although my family wasn't super into our local nature, and I grew up in LA County, and I still live and work in LA County. But when I was growing up, we were also like a family with 3 kids, and we would do a lot of road trips to like the Grand Canyon, or at a certain point we lived in Iowa. So, going to see like Mount Rushmore, things like that, of going out to see big nature were my early experiences and like impactful memories when I was young. So then when I started working in environmental policy, and particularly in California and in LA County, where I was raised, it introduced me to the San Gabriel Mountains. It really demonstrated to me how important our coasts and beaches are. And it, I think, introduced me to nature close to home, and allowed me to then start thinking about, like, how do people access nature close to home in a more consistent way? And also, how do we encourage people to think about stewarding those places, whether that's, getting involved in volunteering with a group, being in a conservation corps, or just voting on issues like a climate bond, that direct funds and support to these lands that are within our care.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I love how you touched on, like, you didn't always know that this was going to be your field, but you ended up here. And because it's such an interdisciplinary field, like, things are not separate, like mental health, physical health, equitable access, protecting the land are also closely tied together. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, and so now we're going to have our next question for all of our panelists to answer. So we'll have them shown back up onto the screen. But yeah, so to tie in, like, the importance of our fellowship and professional development trainings that are out there, like Sharon just mentioned, they could help people even figure out, like, their next step in their career if they weren't super certain of their field at the time. And as we know, in the last year, some of these programs, like fellowships or internships, have not been as clear how long they would be lasting and what the future holds for them. So I am really excited that we get to learn more about different programs that are out there, and also hear about some of the value that they bring to the people who participate in them. So our next question is for each of our panelists to share some of more background on the programs that they enrolled in and what were some of the most valuable experiences they gained. So I'll pass it to whoever wants to answer that one first. Yeah.
I could go first. I'm still pretty like early on in my career, so I've only had two experiences that have been around like a year terms. And those two experiences were obviously like really important for me. My first experience was the Watershed Stewards program, which is a program that collaborates with the California Conservation Corps and AmeriCorps and California volunteers. And it's a really good program because not only like it's this it's very specific because you have this program that like has 40 different sites across California, and all these sites have different needs that the organization needs. And for example, like I was placed at grassroots ecology. That was a really special site because compared to the other sites that were more salmon based, our site was more vegetation work based as well as a lot of volunteer leading. And during that time, that was my first career or first job experience. So I feel like it was something that I really needed to like push me out there. A lot of like the work that we did was leading volunteers or local people in habitat restoration task. And I was very timid when I first started that job. It was really hard for me to like lead people or just speak up. And I feel like it really pushed me to like put myself out there, push beyond my boundaries, because I always had that interest of engaging to the community and being and making like nature more accessible to people of different backgrounds. And I feel like something that was always stopping me in my undergrad career was just that like barrier of being shy or being more on the introverted side. But I feel like I've slowly learned how to like embrace that. And, even though like I could be a little more timid, use that timidness to like work with people. And besides that, I also like have learned so much at graduate ecology, like my first job, my mentor Tyler, who was amazing mentor, he had a lot of patience with me and I feel like has really taught me a lot of stuff. I feel more comfortable in my new position because of that experience that I had with him. He always like made sure that we were always prepared for our next step. And yeah, like currently right now, I'm doing another internship with the Golden Gate National Recreational Area, where I work with the South American vegetation team. And here, thankfully, I feel like my mentorship is way more different Like I know with Tyler, my previous mentor, it was more like managed. Like he made sure that like he was always there to support me. And now here I have my new supervisor who is Laura, who is amazing as well, who has a lot of confidence in us, the interns, and gives us the like independence to do the work on ourselves and like chooses to like allow us to have more liberty on that work. And I feel like because of that first experience I had, I'm able to like work more freely here and more confidently. So I feel like as well, some of the experience I've gained here are like experiences I probably would have had not gained anywhere else. I've gotten my chainsaw certificate here. I've had the opportunity to get my um herbicide applicator certificate, but that was a little hard for me. So still like thinking about it, but I've also had the chance to like work with like really rare and threatened species the correct way. Like I've translocated mission blue butterflies from San Bruno to Sweeney Ridge here in San Mateo. I've had the chance to um collect samples from red northern frogs. And it's just like it's been a really cool experience. And I feel like overall, these internships allow you the chance to like not be fully committed to one job and gives you the opportunity to travel around if, obviously like not everyone has the privilege to do that, but I've thankfully been privileged enough to do that and just explore what you're really interested in. I feel like these past two internships have really solidified that I want to do vegetation work and that I'm highly interested in habitat restoration. So I feel like that's the benefit of like having these experiences.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it's great to hear, yeah, the difference of what mentorship could look from one place to the next. And yeah, to hear about the personal growth and also technical skills that you've gained. Yeah, I think Sharon's ready to go next.
Yeah, I'm happy to go next. I think for me, kind of like I mentioned in my intro, the fellowship that I did, High Meadows Fellowship with the Wilderness Society, that was my first introduction to environmental careers at all. And through that fellowship, which again was specific to my university, but maybe is insightful also because you should look, if you're in an academic setting, undergrad or graduate, you should look into maybe what fellowship opportunities are housed specifically within your university, because the competition is going to be less than if it's like for the state or for the nation. But yeah, that program was 2 years. Well, it was intended to be 2 years, and it just so happened that I ended up becoming a full-time staff person for the Wilderness Society before my fellowship ended. But through that, one, it was very direct experience on the ground with policy advocacy. I was learning how federal legislation was created and advocated for in real time while facilitating coalitions with other people who've been doing this work for like 5-10 years. And so I feel like often I was like, I don't really know why I'm the one facilitating this because I clearly have the least experience, but it was really good experience because now I feel super confident, even as a rising leader, to like step into rooms with executive directors and to be like, well, yes, I think that I should also have, I have as valid of an opinion about some of these policy matters because I'm also a citizen experiencing the natural world and the hurdles to access the natural world, same as you. And through the fellowship as well, there were structures created where, we at the Wilderness Society, we had fellows who were the year above us because it was a 2-year program. There was one fellow who was in the organization who came before me. And then when I was a second-year fellow, there was somebody who came in, and I was kind of a mentor for them. And across all of the different sites of High Meadows Fellows, we also had like retreats every, I don't know, maybe every 6 months or a year. So there was ways for us to be connected to one another, to be peer mentors. And I would say that the Wilderness Society did a great job in terms of finding the people who led the fellowships internally, or like kind of were the fellowship coordinator. And I think it was really up to every organization to figure out how they did that. But the person who I was paired with, her name was Tara, she definitely still to me is a mentor, even though we don't speak as frequently as when I first stepped in as a fellow. But she just was a great model to me, I think, in terms of like being a younger person in rooms oftentimes where you're maybe the only person who looks like you or is your age. And she still was always very professional and confident. And even just giving advice on like, how do you advocate for yourself in your career generally? How do you negotiate a salary? Or there was a lot of things going on inside the Wilderness Society that I think she could have shielded me away from as a fellow and just kind of been like, it doesn't matter to you. But instead, she took them as opportunities for me to experience the work world, and kind of practice those self-advocacy skills.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing that. I love I'm always like, people need to advocate for themselves for positions and learning opportunities. And through doing so, you end up often advocating for others in the process. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, Chiena.
I am taking notes on Perla and Sharon's experience, and I think it's really helping me to see what different experiences we've learned from and what I'm hoping to, share about my own. And I would say for my experience in the California Climate Action Corps, I had two very different years of learning. And I would like to share that the first year was me being a outreach and food recovery fellow. And so I worked with food rescue, and we learned about how certain foods from grocery stores or restaurants are still edible, but they get thrown into landfills. And I think in this program, I had the opportunity to uh, promote my interests, and my interest was in marketing and creating content. And so I had the opportunity to push for that, as well as learn that outreach is super important, and volunteering with the community is also super important. And so in my first field, I think I learned how to speak with volunteers, and I learned how to present. And I think that was something that was really, really hard for me. And so like the previous panelists shared, the confidence of just being in front of people and not wanting to speak versus being pushed by my supervisors to do that really transformed my outlook of what climate action could be. And so I would say that in my first year, I learned how to speak and gather people from clubs and organizations and learn how to mesh volunteer work with climate action. And that led me to my second year in the California Natural Resources Agency, and that was a state agency. So very different from a neighborhood community organization to a state agency. But because I was more confident in my speaking skills, I just brought that over to the state agency, and there would be opportunities where I would just be a fellow that was supposed to help gather content. And I would think I couldn't do it, but my supervisors would tell me what I needed to know, and I would just learn every time how to talk and how to speak. And from speaking with volunteers in the community, I started speaking with environmental partners, with tribal leaders, with people that were very passionate about making a difference in the state level. And I really loved being able to have multiple chances to see what a climate action role could be. And in my year with the California Natural Resource Agency, I learned that they valued heritage months. So in the month of May, they focused on API community and celebrating them. And from that experience, it kind of led to my current situation and my current work in the Sacramento Asian Pacific Chamber of Commerce. I think social justice is really important to the environmental field, making sure we have people that can represent their community, represent their own personal environmental issues or struggles, and be able to advocate for why is that different from another person's experience. And so the California Natural Resource Agency did a great job of making that Heritage Months throughout the whole year important. And I think that led me to where I'm at now. So the fellowships are just really a great place for me to kind of explore what counts as climate action, who is interested in being part of a team, and who is interested in seeing the work that can be done at like different levels in the environmental space. So that was a bit of my experience with the fellowship.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. I love how you also talked about as like I feel like it's really helpful for both people who are in the mentee space and the mentor space of that importance of like trust and being in your growth zone. Like you don't want to always be really comfortable because then you're not going to grow in your career development, but also you want enough like support when you do have those questions so you're not like in your panic zone and like not able to grow. Yeah, so with that in mind of like that important balance and yeah, the mentee mentorship relationship. Our next question that's kind of like for whichever panelist wants to answer it, is can you share an example of mentorship that was especially helpful to you? And on the flip side, if there were any types of mentorship that was not helpful, and in that case, looking back, is there a type of mentorship that you wish you had received?
I'll hop in first. Feel like at the Wilderness Society in particular, again, because it was like my first full-time career experience outside of college through the fellowship, there were a lot of mentorship experiences, formal and informal. Like I mentioned, my supervisor at the time, Tara, I think of her as a mentor. And I think that she intentionally took on the role of mentor, even though that wasn't the title. Like I was like, she's my supervisor, like she's my boss. But she was also a mentor. The organization also at a certain point, maybe a year or so into the time that I was working there, implemented a program that I think was spearheaded by one of the board members, because it was named after him, or an alumni, that was for BIPOC staff to have mentoring relationships with one another. And you would sign up and, you'd put in what you wanted to get out of it and what role you wanted to be in. Did you want to be a mentee, mentor? Because one shouldn't assume. There were older people who ended up being mentees in that program and through those pairings. And you got paired through like the HR department, kind of, employee experience staff who facilitated the program. So I participated in that program and was paired with, besides my supervisor, another internal mentor who was actually like on our executive team. So again, to the point of like being in spaces, especially as a young person, where you typically don't have an opportunity to speak to people in that of those levels in that type of career, that was a great opportunity for me. And the woman who I was paired with, Mo, also I still think of her as a mentor, and I still talk to her like just around the time that I left the Wilderness Society. She was one of the first people that I went to and was like, I'm trying to figure out again my next steps, and I would love to like talk through some of the things that I'm thinking about with you. And of course, if you see other opportunities for me that relate to the experience that I have, because you know me and you know what I've done here, please send them my way. So I think that type of mentorship was very helpful at the time that I was in the Wilderness Society, again, to even help parse like some of the things that happen inside of nonprofits that for a first time employee, it's like, is this normal or is it just this organization? Things like that. And then post both of us leaving the Wilderness Society, still being mentors and having a relationship with each other. And then even I would say that when I became a full-time staff member, still there are mentors that I had, like my department chair, who to me really embodies a lot of the things that I feel like people were putting in the chat of like what makes a mentor. Her name is Yvette, and we're still very close. Thankfully, she lives not so far from me, so we get to spend a lot of time together. But definitely somebody who's empathetic, somebody who definitely I felt like believed in me and our team and really showed that by pushing us, like, you know, to always do our best. Because I knew she believed that we could always do our best, and also showing appreciation, like really taking the time to say, I see the work that you guys are doing and it doesn't go unnoticed. And also giving grace when people need that, because we are all just human beings trying to make it through. But I would say, honestly, one of the things that really stood out for me in my relationship with Yvette as a mentor is how much she's able to model vulnerability while still being a leader. I think that that is like cannot be highlighted enough, and I think is not something that maybe is often highlighted for leaders in the current time. You know, between people individually, in organizations, on a political level, we need to model more vulnerability with each other. I think that having that space to be authentically yourself and to introspect, and also to be like, sometimes I just don't know and we're figuring it out together, is really important, because that also creates the space for the people who are looking to you as a model to do that for themselves. So yeah, those are the things for me that like those are the types of mentorships that I found very helpful. Yeah, people who believed in you and wanted to see you do your best, but also give you the space to simply be human and for them to show up as a human as well. Yeah, I feel like I've already been chatting for a long time, so that's what I'll say.
Nice. I think we'll hop on to the next question. But before we do, I just want to say thank you for your response to that. And yeah, the difference of like sometimes your supervisors are your mentors, but having someone who's not your supervisor be your mentor can also be a super valuable relationship to have. Yeah, thank you for all that you just shared. So I want to say to our audience really quick, I know that we have some people fluctuating in and out as it's our lunchtime break, maybe from work. If you came in on the later end and want to share your name, where you're joining from, and either shout out a mentor that you've had or a couple of great qualities that you've had from mentorship in the chat. Thank you, Sharon, for that kind of reminder as you mentioned it in your response. But yeah, you could put that in the chat. And then also in a little bit, we'll be taking questions from the audience. So if you want to type a question into the Q&A box, I have Amanda helping me out to figure out those questions. So yeah, drop any questions you have in the Q&A. And then for our next question that I have for our panelists, who wants to answer it, is yeah. So many early career professionals and programs, such as like AmeriCorps, fellowship programs, internships, can sometimes face some challenges like limited job security and short-term contracts, and uncertainty about the next step when those programs, whether they're 6 months or 11 months, end. So with that, I'm curious if kind of these realities have shaped any of your career paths, and what changes do you think could be made so others could better support people in similar positions?
I could love to answer this question. I think in my current situation, I'm very much in this challenge myself. I think I had such a impactful climate action fellowship experience, but afterwards it is a little bit harder to figure out, where do I go from here? What am I looking for, either at the same level or something different? And I think something that would have been really helpful is to have the supervisors, mostly the regional supervisors that I had in my fellowship, bring up this very real next step after the fellowship, and maybe even midway in a fellowship term, talk about what are the skills that you are learning now, and what are job roles that exist that you could apply for right away or even before your fellowship ends. I think the fellowship is such a great place to provide your own creativity, your own helpful work and initiatives, but at the end of the day, once it ends, you have to also think about yourself. And I think I spent so much time being so immersed in the fellowship that I didn't want to look at that next step. But at the same time, I understand in my own personal experience, as an AAPI individual, I oftentimes want to help others more than I want to ask for help. So it's something that I think could just be a discussion with some leaders or supervisors in this fellowship, that there are some people that won't push themselves to reach out as much. But at the same time, I still learned a lot for this from this fellowship that I was able to apply to find something else. And so I think it's a mix of making sure that I'm aware of it, but extra support, extra push from the team, from the staff would be very helpful.
Great, thank you so much. Did anyone else want to add on or share? I see Perla shake.
Yeah, I could add on. Also like similar to the previous panelist experience, like I've also done a lot of fellowships, and what comes with fellowships is like this idea of like, oh, being overworked and being underpaid a lot of the time. And I feel like that could be very exhausting, especially like for your first steps into your like first environmental career, because it kind of builds this idea like, you know what, like it's fine, like yeah, I'm being paid like really like low right now, but maybe in the future like I'll be paid more. But just like this really bad like idea, because I feel like a lot of people that I meet who are like in their really stable permanent positions now also have had that experience. And I feel like it's just what comes with working in the environmental world is like a lot of people do go through that experience of like having that first internship or like multiple internships that kind of just are low paying, low benefits, and just like not permanent, which can be like really stressful in the long like run, because obviously, there's like that sense of like not being stable, and also like you kind of create that like bond with that job you're at, but it's at the same time it's like, oh, but you're not here for like the long term. So it can be very like stressful. I feel like in my experience, I've had, times where I'm like, I feel like I'm doing like a lot of work a lot of the times, and but it just doesn't match the pay. So it could be like really overwhelming. But I feel like what has helped me personally when it comes to those experiences is that I'm always looking for like at least internships that provide something back to me. So for example, like the Watershed Stewards program, like maybe I was being paid a stipend of 2,800 a month, but at the same time I would get a $10,000 scholarship at the end. And I was also getting that professional development with various people who had the same like upbringing as me, who also like went through those first challenges in the environmental world as in career. And currently right now as well, like I'm in this other internship that is not like high paying, but I have free housing, and I've had the opportunity to like get certificates and other like development professional. Like for example, like I recently went to the White Mountains and I was able to like do like really cool plant surveys for free. I was able to take a government vehicle and like not have to use my own money for those expenses. So always like look for those like ways to like, even though like you're being paid less, that the internship you're in is giving back to you in a beneficial way, because it definitely is out there that these internships are willing to at least give you something back, and always make sure that like it's gonna help you like on the long run for like other like careers. Like for example, like right now, like they're really helping us with our resume building for federal jobs, or they're also helping us to like, we have various like workshops that help us create a resume, and we have just like a lot of support from our supervisors, and even like from like the previous question, like seek out to other like supervisors as well and other like mentors that could help you in like these next steps, even though like it's really hard, but like, be vulnerable.
Great. Thank you so much for both sharing those different ways that support can look like from different organizations or agencies to help people either during their fellowships or even beyond. Thank you both. I'm going to go over to our Q&A now. So whoever wants to answer these as it seems fit, but we have a question that is, if you did your undergraduate degree in something unrelated to conservation, how might this affect your ability to participate in internships or fellowships in the field?
I'm happy to address that first because I think maybe that's based on my experience, on undergrad experience versus the work I'm in now. I think that there are definitely creative ways that you can think about getting into internships or opportunities in the environmental field. I'm noticing the question in the Q&A specifically talks about like accounting. Well, all nonprofits need an accountant, they have a finance team. So just really thinking about, there are people who need your skill set, even if it's not directly related to like plant science or conservation science. You can bring your existing skill set to the places that will provide benefit to your environment. Or if you do want to go back to like step one and, take an introductory internship or even take classes that show you more about the environmental sciences, I would say don't hesitate to do that. Although I wasn't expecting to bring it up in this particular Q&A, in the time that I was between jobs from the Wilderness Society now to the Catalina Island Conservancy, I was just taking a lot of community college courses, and one of those was in botany, because after I'd had started working in conservation policy, I was really interested to know more about plant science. And I was already coming from a place where I did have some career experience and I was not going to be a botanist, but it's helpful, especially in the work that I do now where I'm advocating for some of our restoration work. Like I understand why certain plants should be on Catalina versus what should not be, even if they're native to California. There's complex science behind why some things should be in there and some things should not. So yeah, don't be afraid also to like go back to the very basics and educate yourself using your local resources.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I definitely agree with what Sharon just said. And like when you're early on, people understand that you might have a diversity of interests. And I also want to just add on, like, you could go volunteer. There's so many environmental nonprofits and different groups that do like weekend volunteer events. And it's a really great way to give back to your community and also just learn about some of the like spaces around where you live. So highly recommend that too. I see a question from someone who was actually on our panel 2 years ago, from Barbara Camacho Garcia. So looking at your mentors, peers, and the next generation, what is something that gives you hope or inspires you? Yeah.
I could answer that. So personally, like I currently work for or interning for the National Park Service. And because of that, the National Park Service has been hit pretty hard because of, the president and the administration. There's been a lot of layoffs. There's been a lot of like funding problems with like certain grants that have, such words like diversity or like words that, like people have like kind of like blocked out, or like science-based, women of color, so it's been really hard to like see that, it has gone this far where like a lot of people are losing their jobs, losing money, and I feel like even though this is going on, the Golden Gate National Recreational Area has really done a great job in making sure that the people are supported constantly. And, they continue to support like different nonprofits like Latino Outdoor or like other organizations that focus on people of color and, different people on the spectrum, like we still continue to like promote those things that like the government has not been really good at, just like, you know, and it gives me hope a lot because like the people here, like it makes me see like the people here who have our permanent staff strongly believe that, they're not going to change their way of being. Like these are still things that are very important to the mission of the National Park Service. So it's like even knowing that like just the people who are being hired, like who are incurring like these permanent positions believe in like the people like us. So it's been really rewarding and it gives me hope for like even like just the interns, because I feel like recently we had this conversation of like, oh, I'm an intern and I'm a person of color. Like, why am I like working for the government? But it's like, oh, it's like it takes these positions for people to continue like working within the National Park Service to continue promoting people of color and people of different walks of life. So I feel like that has given me hope that our supervisors and our staff have given us like I guess like the go to keep promoting and just being ourselves in these open spaces.
I'd love to hop on that question too, with a similar perspective of the end. I personally think one of my favorite parts of being part of a fellowship is meeting the cohort. And what gives me hope is that I had the opportunity to meet as many other fellows at the very beginning, learn about them, and then follow them on social channels. And the work that they end up doing is just a really, really helpful reminder that environmental action can take place anywhere and in a lot of different ways. And I love seeing like-minded people doing similar work in their own cities, in their own neighborhoods, because before when I graduated, you kind of just go back to maybe your own life or your own circle of friends that might be near you when you pursued something that was very environmental related, and then you don't know who to talk to again. So I think the cohort just made me realize that there are so many people out there that want to be part of taking action and being part of initiatives that help the nature that they are next to, and I had the opportunity to see like other fellows create organizations for themselves or look into opportunities to be a bigger part of their environmental space and then to kind of watch them in their careers. And I think that's always been so inspiring to me because it makes me feel like even though we are young, we are still environmental professionals that are passionate about this field, and we have the opportunity to keep inspiring people, especially if people see they look like us and they want to make a difference too, that we are going to work together and that it's not just something that is just a big web of we don't know where to start. Like there's people in it, and it's really nice to be able to know people that are passionate and then to like just slowly follow what they're up to after the fellowship or during the fellowship. So making friends along the way has been one of the best parts of joining fellowships like this.
Awesome. Thank you so much for, yeah, sharing a bit about the joy and inspiration. I know, like, Perla, when you were talking, I was like, this really is like hitting the heart of like, yeah, just acknowledging how difficult things can be in this space right now. Like, we all know that environmental justice is tied in and not separate to protecting land and land conservation. But yeah, it's so inspiring to just know how many people are still out there and doing the work, even though it's maybe even harder now, but they're getting the work done to make sure that it's not all, yeah, lost or paused for 4 years. So yeah, thank you both for all that you just shared. We only have a couple minutes left, so I'm gonna try to have us squeeze in one more question. So maybe just we'll have each panelist take about a minute to, yeah, keep on this theme of joy and inspiration, and yeah, thinking about how the three of you are all emerging leaders. And this panel is really aiming to highlight your contributions curious, like looking ahead, and thinking about your work, if it helps to think about it like in the next 3 years or whatever timeline that makes sense for you. What would you like to see your impact be? Or alternatively, like what are some of your career goals that you'd like to achieve in the next couple of years?
I don't mind sharing real quick. I think for myself, what I've been able to do is just uplift stories in the API space. And I think the work that people are doing is different and deserves to be shared. And so I would like to continue to promote those stories and be holding a microphone in front of people's faces and asking them, why are you in this environmental space? Why does your background impact the way you make decisions? And to make people more well known, just show more of the behind the scenes. Instead of like thinking of the big organization, because I think people individually have so much to share. So I would love to continue doing that.
I can go next. I feel like I really hope that I'm still doing vegetation work. You know, habitat restoration is a never-ending work in progress. Um, but more than that, I feel like I'm really grateful that I could always work with people through my job. And I hope that like from 3 years from now, like I could possibly like, and I've even now, like I continue to meet volunteers outside of my job spaces. And they're like, hey, like I remember you told me this. Like I remember you told me like, this plant does this. Or like, hey, remember that one time you just taught me how to plant this plant? I was like, yeah, like, and it's just like moments like those that like really make the job really worth it because, I feel like it's a chance where people get really vulnerable with you in the field. And it's just like that kind of like childlike energy that people like bring out when they're learning again things for the first time or even for like the second or third time. So it's really nice. And I feel like I would really hope that I'm continuing to do habitat restoration and still leading people in these various tasks. And I hope that, 3 years from now that like what's currently going on is not, I know it's probably gonna be like more impacted, but I hope that people still continue to like, including myself, are still encourage and still, have the passion to continue and, like even through all like the different like stuff being thrown at us that people still feel empowered by the work that they do.
I feel like for my career, I hope that I do have the ability to keep working in conservation policy. I think more so now than ever. Um, I would love to see more nature-based solutions like as a viable economic pathway forward. Um, I I feel like for me personally, I love to travel and things like that. And so the places that I've been that really have stood out to me in terms of how they think about a sustainable economy, incorporate employing a wide public to take care and steward the land, whether that's sweeping streets, having people who are pulling weeds, that beautifies the environment. It gives people a job, all of those things. Those are the types of things that I would love to see promoted in LA County, in the state of California, across the nation, like those types of economic, let's think about how to bring nature and the economy together so we all move forward. Those are the things that I would like to have be an impact of my work portfolio into the future. And while it was joked at my high school graduation that I might be president, I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's time for me to seek political office is the next specific career goal. We'll see. It's good to have lofty goals.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah. Shoot. Yeah. Shoot for the stars. Great. Well, that concludes our questions for our panelists today. Thank you, panelists, so much for all the thought and heart and energy you put into sharing with the panel today. Devin, you're sharing the wrong one. Um, And yeah, thank you to our audience for joining us today and asking questions and just being present and learning a little bit more about our rising leaders and the importance of career development programs. If you thought this was really valuable and you want to share it beyond, this was recorded today and that recording will be posted. I'm going to share the YouTube channel. You could also see some of the other webinars that have already happened. Last month, there was a really great conversation surrounding mutual aid strategies amid the climate crisis. So that's a really great one to go take a look at. And yeah, I am super excited to see where all of our panelists go with their future. And I'm so grateful for the work that they're doing in their jobs and also just in the spaces that they are in. So yeah, thank you all. If you want to learn more about the California Landscape Stewardship Network and our JEDI Roundtable or Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Roundtable, please take a look at that. And then also, yeah, feel free to reach out to that email that you're seeing on the screen, coordinator@calsn.org. Yeah, and thank you all again so much for joining us.